We left off yesterday where Esav comes back from the field and he sees Yaakov cooking lentil soup. And he says to Yaakov, Posek Lamed, V'yome el Yisav el Yaakov, haliteni no min ha'odom hazer. He uses an interesting word, haliteni. So Rashi explains, he quotes the Gemara, that when you feed a camel, how do you feed a camel? You open its mouth, you just pour it down its throat. Esav was so fatigued and so hungry, he says, just pour it down my throat. I don't have the strength to pick it up and put it into my own mouth. Just pour it down my throat. And he doesn't even refer to it what it is, lentil soup or this stew. He says, just that red stuff. Meaning he was so mesmerized by the look of that stew that it was red. He was touched by the redness of it. He just pour it down my throat. Because I am fatigued. Therefore, he was called Edom. So take a look in Rashi. Haliteni. Eftach pi ushvoch harbe l'tocho. I'll open my mouth, just pour it into my mouth. Give me a mouthful. Moshe Shoninu ein ovsim es hagomol al malpinoso. The different ways you feed animals. Sometimes you have to put it in the mouth and you push it down their throats. So it's an expression of the way an animal. There's halacha and shulchan aruch. It has to do with refinement. That when you eat, you say a motzi, and you eat the bread, and you have a slice of bread, you have a roll, a bagel. You don't bite into the bagel. You don't bite into the bread. What you do is you say the bracha on the complete roll, then you break off a piece, and you put the small piece in your mouth. That's considered refined behavior. But to take the bagel or the roll or the large piece of bread, just bite into it, it's unrefined, it's coarse. So when Esav says to Yaakov, just pour it down my throat, a refined human being doesn't eat that way. Just pour it down my throat. I mean, you're not an animal. Some people, they're so into eating, they can't control themselves. Years ago, they used to say a joke. Today, they don't have that. One time they had at weddings or a bar mitzvah, they had a table, it's called the Viennese table. That after they served a 15-course meal, finally they bring in the Viennese table, had all kinds of pastry on it, all kinds of chocolates, all kinds of liqueurs, fruits, and that was the dessert. The people just finished with a smorgasbord, a 10-course meal, and now they bring in the Viennese table, and they made a whole issue over it. The music would play, the lights would go on and off, and they would roll it in, and everybody got excited. And they go and they run over to a table like they never ate before. So years ago, jokingly, they used to call it the Vietnamese table, like in Vietnam, the war. They attacked it. I mean, slow up a little bit. There's a certain appropriate behavior. I mean, after eating so much, well, we didn't have that sweet chocolate or whatever, the pastry. We didn't have it yet. It's not refined. It's not appropriate behavior. Haliteni, pour it down my throat. It's not the way you behave. So when Yaakov sees this behavior, not that he didn't know who Esav was. He knew who Esav was. He saw there. Yaakov never shared with his father, who his twin brother was, as Rivka never did. Is this person appropriate to be the Kohen? To serve Hashem, to be God's officiant? Firstly, he's a Russia. But he's a Russia who has such predilection, such behavior patterns. For him to serve Hashem would be a disgrace. So we'll see in a moment. Why did Yaakov at this moment purchase the birthright from Esav? Is it because he wanted to snatch it from him? Or he felt, seeing this kind of behavior and knowing who he is, if he has the opportunity to take the birthright, that it should not be a chil Hashem. he's going to take the birthright. And since Esav now is the weak moment, it's not like snatching candy from a baby, take advantage of Esav. Now he has the moment of opportunity that he's able to secure the Kavod Shamayim, that God's name shouldn't be disgraced to have such an officiant, as we'll see in a moment. Yaakov, Michro li chayom, es b'choros li. Sell me as it's day, as it's clear as day, meaning no ambiguity. Let's do a clear, uncontested sale that will never be contested. Sell me your birthright. So Rashi says, Michro kayom. He didn't say you should sell me the Bechorah, Bechoroscha. The Bechorah that identifies with your birthright. So Rashi says, Lefi Shavoda B'Bechoros. We find that if the Jews wouldn't have sinned with the Chet Egel, who would have been the Kohanim? The Kohanim would have been the firstborns, the Bechorim. So the service in the Mishkan or eventually the Beis Hamikdash, whose domain is that? It's the domain of the Bechor. Oma Yaakov, Ein Rosha Kedai, Ein Rosha the Kedai Shi Yikrav or Yikarig LaKodesh Baruch Hu. It's not worthwhile or appropriate that this Rosha should get close to God. He has to stay out of God's domain. This person being the Kohen, having the birthright, it will be disgracing Hashem. Therefore, Bichra Kayom, Bechoroscha, sell me your Bechorah, because you're not appropriate. Not that I want the Bechorah for myself, because I want to have the merit to serve Hashem. If you're the Bechorah, you should be the one. But because you're not qualified, because of who you are, that's why I'm taking it. And if I don't take it, you'll be the one. And if you're the one, it's a disgrace of Hashem. Yaakov Yishov Ali. He says, I want you to take an oath, kayom, again, kayom, that it should be uncontested. You took an oath, it's binding, that you cannot go back on it. Yishavalo, and Esav swore. He swore to Yaakov, the Yimkar es bechoroso Yaakov, and he sold his birthright to Yaakov. So Rashi says, we'll see in a moment. I mean, we skipped the pasuk. Lamed Beis. Yom Esav. Hine anochi holding chlomos. Esav says to Yaakov, "I'm going to die in either case. Lomli bechorah. What do I need the bechorah?" Okay, this is what he says. What do you mean you're going to? Everybody's going to die. The person says, "What do I need it anyway? Might as well give away everything. I'm dying." So he explains. Misnodedis Holeches, the first pshat, he says, first explanation. Yeah, but the Bechorah ultimately is not going to remain with the firstborn. She'll take Eis Avos HaBechoros, Ki Shevet Levi Yitaloso. It's something which is only here temporarily. Ultimately, the Bechorim will lose it. It's going to Shevet Levi. It's in parentheses. V'od, Omer Esav, Mati V'shel Avodazu. Esav says, tell me. Esav didn't know. Serving God is considered something of distinction, what's auspicious. But what is it? Amalo, Asoros Ochin, Umisos Tluyinbo. The many transgressions and many liabilities if you serve God. You have to be so meticulous and so cognizant every moment. And if the behavior is inappropriate, it has very serious liability. So by having the Bechorah, you're putting yourself in jeopardy. Koshaninu, Elu, Shebemiso. When is the Kohen subject to spiritual excision? Shriyayin, if you drink wine. You drink a Revius, you're disqualified. Furi Rosh, if you let your hair grow more than 30 days and you do the avoda, you do the service. Omar, so when he heard this, and the Holech Lomus Al Yodos, if that's the birthright, being involved and being who I am, I cannot be careful enough. What do I need? It's all liability. So therefore, I'm happy to give it away. and he sold it. So again, Yaakov presented in a way that he should see it, that it's a liability, and it doesn't fit the profile. But again, why did Yaakov want it? Why did he present it in this light? Not that Yaakov wanted it for himself, only because Yaakov felt Esav being who he is, it would be a disgrace that he should be the Kohen. Because initially the Bechor was the Kohen. And that's why he had the opportunity to take it. At this moment, he took it. Okay? So if you take a look later, when Yaakov eventually takes the Bechor at the age of 63, and as a result of it, he has to flee. And he's away from his parents' home for 36 years because he's instructed by his mother to leave, because if he stays, his brother vows to kill him. So Esav comes back and he realizes that Yaakov snatched it away from him, and he's beside himself. And he realizes that Yaakov deceived him and deceived his father. That's why he's processing it. And therefore, he starts wailing and crying to his father. His father says, but I gave it away already. You have no other blessing for me. So the Torah tells us Kishmo Esav is Divrei Aviv. When Esav heard the words of his father, that he gave away the Bechorah to Yaakov, Yitzhak Tzokah Gedol Mora, he cried a bitter cry, Adbo, to a great degree. Ovi, bless me, my father. I should also be worthy of a brocha. Your brother came with wisdom. Rashi says Mirma means with chokhmah, and he took your bracha. From she goes. Now he says like this. He says to Esau, you will live by your sword, and you're going to serve your brother. Even though your brother's younger, he will serve him because he is the true Bechor. He's more qualified than you are. However, so Rashi says something interesting. However, if it should come a moment where Yaakov should fail, then you're going to regain and recoup what you gave up. And you can have the upper hand. Take Rashi. Take a look. Chav Zayin Ches. Torid. Loshin Tsar. Torid means, like you say, first person feels down. Torid, down. When you feel down, you feel depressed, you feel melancholy. Loshin Tsar, Ko Orid Besichi, Klomar. Yavru Yisrael ala Torah. Well, Klal Yisrael will transgress and violate the Torah. Viel l'cha pischon peh. Litztar ala brochos shenotal. And when the Jews, they transgress and violate the Torah, you will have a legitimate reason to be pained that the brachos were taken from you. Shenotal. And then you'll be able to throw off his yoke from you. Right now, he has the upper hand. But if the Jews should fail, and you're pained for what they had taken away from you, and you're justified, you have a pischon peh, you have a legitimate claim to be pained for what he had taken. At that moment, you can throw their yoke off you, and that's what it's going to be a Yinayim de Esau. Then you're going to have the upper hand. I mean, what do we need this? Should have said, if the Jews fail, you will recoup. You recoup what he took. What do you mean you have a right to be pained? For your pain that you were so-called denied the birthright, it'll be legitimately, you have a legitimate claim to regain the birthright. Why is it a legitimate claim? So let's understand. Initially, why did Yaakov take the birthright from Esav? Because he says Esav, being who he is, not being that spiritual person, being that earthly person, being consumed and subsumed by his evil inclination, it's not appropriate that kind of person should be God's officiant. That's why Yaakov took it. Rosh Zeh, it's inappropriate that he should come close to God, to have this kind of Kohen. But what about the Jews themselves? They misbehave and they don't keep the Torah. If the only legitimate reason you had a right to take it, because you're more appropriate than I am, what about if the Jews don't toe the line and we don't keep the Torah? If that's the case, we have no right to it. Because the only reason why Yaakov took it was because of Chil Hashem. But if we ourselves don't behave properly, and we are a similar Chil Hashem, if that's the case, you have a right to reclaim what you gave up. Because the only reason why he took it was because I wasn't qualified. But if they're no more qualified than you are, that's the Pischum pay. You have a right. It's legitimate. You have a right to have that pain. It's going to revert back to you. And as a result of that, you'll be able to throw his yoke off your neck, and therefore you'll have the upper hand. The bracha he gave Esav was, what the Yaakov, Hakol Kol Yaakov Yadayim B'nei Esav. The voice is the voice of Yaakov, and the hands are the hands of Esav. So the Midrash tells us in the introduction to Echo, if the Kol is Kol Yaakov, if the Jews lived their lives by the sound of Torah and Tefillah, then Esav is incapacitated. You have the upper hand. But if the Kol is not the Kol Yaakov, the Jews don't study Torah and they don't supplicate Hashem. It's all Koch v'yotzim Yodi. Osas Chayil Azer. Then it's Yadayim B'nei Esav. Then the hands will be the hands of Esav. Esav will have the upper hand, and you'll be vulnerable to their dominance. And because, excuse me, Esav Sonei Yaakov, Esav Sonei hates Yaakov, despises his existence, there'll be a very serious reaction, and you can be under his heel. That's Yadayim B'nei Esav. Because again, there is this struggle between good and evil. The only way the good has the upper hand, if you live your life within the context of good, if you represent good. But if you don't represent good, then evil rears its head. That's exactly the tug of war between good and evil. Yaakov understood, I'm taking the birthright because he's inappropriate and I represent the good, which is what why God created this world. But if the Jew himself follows the path of the Esav, what happens? It reverts right back to Esav. He has the birthright, he has all the blessings, and therefore he will dominate. Now, it's interesting. I asked the question, after Yaakov fled, due to the instruction of his mother understanding, Yitzchak didn't understand why he was leaving. Rivka says to Yitzchak, I'm disgusted with the behavior of Esav's wives. They're idolaters. Our son Yaakov has to find a wife from our family, meaning the daughters of my brother, Lavan's daughters. So Yitzchak instructs Yaakov, he should go to Lavan's home, to that community, to take one of Lavan's daughters as a wife. Yitzchak never knew the reason why he was leaving was because Esav vowed to kill Yaakov. Only Rivka knew this. He was going. And there's no question. Just as when Eliezer went to seek a wife for Yitzchak, went with tremendous wealth, because Avram understood exactly who these people are all about. Because if you go there, if you don't have that negotiating chip, which is called tremendous wealth, you go there, you don't get out of it. You can't extricate yourself from there. The bargain will be such a difficult agreement, you'll never leave. So seemingly Yaakov, when he went, Rivka and Yitzchak, understanding who Lavan was, they sent with tremendous wealth. What happened? Rashi cites the Chazal. He sent the Eliphaz after Yaakov to kill him because he fled. So Yaakov had a discussion with Eliphaz because Eliphaz studied with Yitzchak. He says, your grandfather, Yitzchak, taught you Ani Choshev Kemes, that a poor man is considered like a dead man. So instead of killing me, because he says, how could you kill me? It says, you're not permitted to commit murder. He says, but there's a mitzvah kibbut oveim. My father commanded me, I must kill you. He says, I have a way to reconcile it. Take all my wealth. And as you learned, Ani Choshev Kemes, so you've already met the criteria of killing me. So you fulfilled the commandment of honoring your father and let me go. Eliphaz agreed, took all Yaakov's wealth. Yaakov continued to the house of Lavan. Now the question is, when Eliphaz comes back home with all this wealth, and Esav says to Eliphaz, what happened? Did you kill Yaakov? He says, well, he gave me a lumdership shot, Ani Choshev Kemes, and therefore, technically I killed him, but I didn't kill him. What do you think, Esav? How do you think Esav reacted? He must have taken his son, broken his neck. I mean, what kind of answer is this? You know, it's like, you'd say to a person who doesn't understand the Hilchas Erevin. An Erev, you have to circumscribe a community. How do you do it? It has to be enclosed with a wall. So you take 2 vertical posts and put a horizontal post across the top and close the community. That's called an enclosure. Why is it called an enclosure? Well, because when you look at that, that's called a wall. That's a halachic wall. Person says, what are you talking about? Imagine a person wants to build a house and the architect designs something and the contractor puts up a house with 2 vertical beams and 1 beam goes 4 walls. He says, this is the house. You pay the bill. Person says, that's a house. I don't see any walls. I just see strings that you barely can notice. What do you mean, so why did Esav, knowing exactly where he was, he should have followed Yaakov to Lavan and killed Yaakov? But he let Yaakov be. Why did he let him be? That's the question we asked. So we explained exactly what we're saying now. Why does Esav want to kill Yaakov? Because he took the birthright. But the birthright is only Yaakov's as long as he behaves like Yaakov. The moment he doesn't behave like Yaakov, the birthright reverts back to Esav. Nobody understood Lavan the way Esav understood Lavan. When Yaakov fled to Choron, he said to Hashem, Ushmarani, I'm asking you to protect me. What do you want to be protected from? That he should not learn from their ways. That he should not learn from their ways that in that community, people commit adultery, incest, murder, and idolatry. And it was impossible to survive. Unless he had a special shmirah from Hashem, you cannot survive it. Esav understood, if he's going there penniless, and he's going there, he needs a wife, and he has to negotiate a wife, the amount of time he's going to be there, by the end of the day, he's not going to be Yaakov any longer. And if he's not Yaakov any longer, he's going to forfeit the birthright, and the birthright reverts right back to him. So therefore, Esav says, what do I have to bother myself? I have his wealth. The birthright's not relevant any longer to him, because he himself is going to fail as Yaakov, because in that environment, you cannot survive as a spiritual person. If that's the case, there's no reason to go after. That's why, because again, the birthright was contingent that you have to behave like Yaakov. That's a kol Yaakov. As he says, if they should fail as Jews, and you have a pischon pen litztayer ala b'chora, you have a legitimate reason to be pained for the birthright to be taken from you, it reverts back to you. That's the reason why Esau did not pursue Yaakov. What happens? They had seen each other for nearly 36 years. And all of a sudden, he sends him these very valuable gifts, herds, flocks, with different groups of people. What does he see over here? Seemingly, he survived. And he says to Esav, Im Lavan Garti, I wasn't scathed as much as an iota of my spirituality. So when he asked this from Yaakov, when he sent him that message, even before he sent him the gift, Im Lavan Garti, you know what happened? He saw red. Like he saw that lentil soup red, he saw Odom Hazer. He saw red. like a bull sees red. He's coming after Yaakov because now he realizes what he believed all these years, that the birthright was coming back. The birthright is secure with Yaakov. If that's the case, he's going to war. Because again, the only reason why I didn't go after him because it was contingent on you behaving like Yaakov. To live by love him for all these years, impossible to survive as a Yaakov. All of a sudden you realize miraculously, somehow Yaakov is coming back as Yaakov, even greater. If that's the case, we're back at square one. Back at square one, the messages, the angels say he's coming against you with 400 men. This is all out war. It said, and this is very important. Baruch, you can say this over this, they haven't heard because I just said it yesterday. How did Esau deceive his father to such a point that his father believed he was a tzaddik? So Rashi says, Kitzayim Befiv, right at the beginning of the parsha. Why did he love Esau? Because Tzayim Befiv. So the word tzayim, the trapping was in his mouth. So Rashi cites two interpretations. Tzayim Befiv either means because what he hunted, he provided food for his father. His trappings he brought for his father to eat. Or Tzayim Befiv, he entrapped him with his mouth, speaking with the guile and the glibness and everything else. He deceived his father, allowing him to believe that he's a tzaddik. And Rashi cites the Medrash. He would ask his father, when you take salt, how do you tithe it? When you take straw, do you tithe straw? See, so with these kinds of questions, he sees that Esau is a tremendous tzaddik. So the Sephardo explains, there's no question in Yitzchak's mind, of the two sons, who was the more spiritual? Yaakov was the more spiritual. He's Yaakov Ishtam Yeshiva. He studies day and night in Yeshiva Shevever. So he's the more spiritual of both of them. So what's even the consideration? I mean, Yitzchak is Yitzchak. He's the patriarch. Don't you think he should love Yaakov? So over there, the Shur says, when it says he loved Esau, mean in addition to Yaakov. It doesn't mean more, in addition. Because what do you mean, how could he even love him? He's a hunter. You know, he's in the pool all day. He's in the pool all day, or in the gym all day. How could he even love him? Of course he loved Yaakov. No, he also loved him. That's what Sforno learns. Why? So he explains that just as Yaakov had an agreement between Yisachar and Zvulun, that Zvulun was the material provided for Yisachar, that he should not be distracted from his Torah learning. Esau, being a man of the world, being the hunter, he will provide the sustenance for Yaakov to be able to fully immersed without distraction in his Torah learning. That's what Yitzchak believed, because he believed Esau be a tzaddik. And although he's not Yaakov in terms of the understanding of what learning is, but because he values it to such a degree, he'll be an appropriate provider. But little did he know that he's a Rasha. And if he had the purse strings, we're talking about it was a material blessing. You will have the purse strings because you'll be the provider for Yaakov. Rivka, through divine communication, says, send Yaakov, he has to take the brachos. Because if Esav Chas v'Shalom has the brachos, he will strangle Yaakov. Yaakov will wither away. He will destroy Yaakov. Meaning Yaakov has to be in control of his own purse strings. It cannot be Esav. That's the give and take. Now, but why did Yitzchak think that he's the proper provider? Because he thought he's a tzaddik. But even more than that. Now, when Yaakov set up the relationship between Yisachar and Zvulun, he had other sons. Why did he choose Zvulun over all the other sons to be the provider for Yisachar? Yisachar is depicted by the Novi Yodei Itim. Whenever they have to decide should it be a 13th month, or for Kiddush HaChodesh, which had to do with mathematical calculations, you have to have a certain degree of clarity. And Chazal tell us, whenever there was any question in halacha, and there was an impasse, they would go to Yisachar, and because Yisachar had certain clarity of mind, because he wasn't distracted, because he didn't have to attend to his material needs, he was able to break the impasse by giving clarity on the subject matter, and they were able to give a conclusive ruling. That was Yisachar. But he had that clarity because Zvulun provided for him. But why did Yaakov choose Zvulun? So evidently it's clear, because the only one who could be the appropriate provider, as it should be, that there should be no distraction, it would be Zvulun, of all the brothers. Because Yaakov understood his children, their spiritual makeup, and what their capacity was, and he understood Zvulun will be the best provider of all the brothers. Therefore, the partnership is between Zvulun and Yisachar. But to what degree is it? So Chazal tell us, it's a medrash. Now, what determines to what degree you're going to service Yisachar? The more you esteem and value Torah, that's the degree that you will service and accommodate him. Because you see, that's the ultimate. To what degree did Zvulun accommodate and support Yisachar? So it says in the Medrash, "Hayusomim es ochel bepi Yisachar." You hear this? That's the words of Chazal. They would take the food and literally put it in their mouths. They were, in the word, there was such a haracha, there was such a esteem for Torah, that they would not want Yisachar to be distracted as much as Iota. They put the food right before them, that they shouldn't even have to go into the kitchen. Everything would be brought that they shouldn't even, for a moment, have to be distracted from Torah whatsoever. That was the degree. Somim es ochel b'piem shel Yisachar. That was the indication of the level of harocha, of esteem they had for Torah. Okay? That's why only Zvulun was at that level. Others they provide. They'll write him a check, now go buy your own food. Versus in Ksubis, why is a woman, when it comes to chesed, she has greater merit? Because when the husband gives charity, tzedakah, he gives money. He'll give the raw product. When the wife gives the food to the poor man, the food already is prepared. The bread, the food is edible immediately. It's for immediate consumption. So Gemara says Ksubis because it's korban the yaiso, because the benefit to be is immediate. Therefore, the woman has greater merit when she gives tzedakah than when the man gives tzedakah. If someone they esteemed the Torah to such a degree, they didn't want Yisachar to be distracted as much as an idol from the Torah. Now, the Torah tells us, why did Yitzchak love Esav? Sayid Befiv. He put the food into Yitzchak's mouth, meaning that was part of the deception. It's not just he fed him. It's because Yitzchak believed that because Esav has an appreciation for his spirituality, that he's the Merkava, he doesn't want him to be distracted as much as Iota. Therefore, he brings the food literally to put it in his mouth. So because he has such a harocha, such a understanding of the innate value of Torah, he is the appropriate Zvulun for Yaakov. So but that was part of the guile. Putting the food into Yitzchak's mouth was the equivalent of Zvulun putting the food into Yisachar's mouth. But little did he know this was all part of his guile. That was part of his charade. It's not just he fed him. No, it was befiv. As Zvulun put it, befiv shel Yisachar. Therefore, to him, he was convinced he should be the Zvulun for the Yisachar, which is Yaakov.